few years ago, an alumnus from the class of 1995, Stephen Bess, asked me about honoring his English teacher while I was here, Dr. Pascal, my predecessor, and thought that perhaps finding a way to celebrate and showcase writing would be a positive step for MBA. And so we talked about the idea of this college essay contest, which we're about to hear now for about the third or fourth time. Stephen has been here for the contest, and he's now watching us live in California, where he works in the Los Angeles area. And so I'd like to, of course, say thank you to him and hello this morning, and let you all know that we're pleased to have Dr. Doug Christiansen here from Vanderbilt, who is in the center of that table, as well as 4 of our staff members who are working. Let's welcome Dr. Christiansen. Ms. Maddox's office, do you need to say anything? No. She has organized this morning, and so we're going to hear from 3 seniors, and then we have some important agenda items planned in between their reading their essays and the announcement of the best essay at the end of assembly. So let's begin with Clay Andreen.
I answer the prompt, describe an important moment in your life. Trash boy. Well, that's okay. Executive trash boy? No, that sounds a little pretentious. How about senior trash boy? Well, I don't have the experience necessary of taking out the trash needed for the promotion to a senior position. So I've got it, manager of trash removal. Well, I'm not really a manager. I guess trash boy will have to do. This reflection was one of the many that flooded my head when I drove back from my first day at an internship at the Safe Haven Family Shelter. 4 students were selected to work as paid interns at various organizations around Nashville. I was fortunate enough to work for an organization that helped homeless families stay together. While their mission statement is moving, and I agreed with the way they ran their business, they obviously weren't using me to my full potential. I attend Montgomery Bell Academy, work hard in school, make good grades. So why aren't these people seeing my ability to help them with their jobs? I mean, I understand that I probably cannot jump in as the CEO, but I'm definitely qualified to do something more glamorous than trash takeout and dinner cleanup, right? Well, I showed up the next day with a similar mindset. Throughout the day, I did the same chores, expecting at any moment to be called into one of their offices for a promotion. Unfortunately, the day ended, and I went home frustrated, angered by the lack of a job title and my inability to contribute in what I thought was a meaningful capacity. Over the next week, however, I realized that while cleaning is not the most glamorous job, it is essential to a company. And because the other employees did not have to clean up their building, they could focus solely on their jobs. Emboldened with this new outlook, I returned to work to put my new mentality into results. Instead of complaining because I didn't have the job I wanted, I worked as diligently as I could at whatever my supervisor gave me. First, my boss had me pack the entire building into an endless supply of cardboard boxes since the organization was changing locations. Instead of meandering through this chore, I packed up all the non-essential items in the building in just a few days. Next, they gave me an opportunity to use my theater mock trial experience by answering the phones for people calling, asking about help. In addition to answering these phones, I began to work on a project that I had proposed. There's a waiting list for individuals seeking help at the shelter, and I began calling people on this list in an attempt to find out which individuals still needed aid and who no longer needed assistance. Once the new location, I finally got that promotion. I was given my own office with a desk and a phone. While I continued answering the phones, I was given a new task to pursue. Since the new building was larger, I was asked to read various resumes submitted by individuals applying for a new shelter manager position. At the end of every day, I gave a briefing to the head of the organization about the candidates who I thought were the most qualified. After I received some feedback, I called 5 of the applicants to interview for this position, and a week later, Safe Haven had a new shelter manager. There is something extraordinary in the mundane. One does not have to be a superhero, and there is a satisfaction in knowing one's place. When I was young, I wanted a job like an astronaut that seemed exhilarating and impactful. What I learned from this job, however, is that the world needs a variety of individuals with different roles in an organization, and that everyone can contribute in some way towards a common goal. Thank you.
I answered the prompt, describe a time you found yourself in an uncomfortable or difficult situation. How did you cope with it, and what did you learn from it? The first time I saw her, I was positive she was a witch. Well, maybe not really a witch, but with her frenetic red hair, her missing teeth, and her crooked slouch, she could play one on TV. She stands on the same street corner each day selling The Contributor, a local newspaper sold by Nashville's indigent and homeless. For 2 years, I've bought her newspaper, more for the charity than the articles, and each purchase I greeted her with a friendly, "How are you doing?" For 2 years, her response, gruff from the ever-present dangling cigarette in her mouth, was always some version of, "I'm terrible. I can't make my rent." Wishing her well, I'd hand her a couple dollars and wait for the light to turn green. More often than not, she'd sulk back to the sidewalk with her thank you barely audible. Her ungrateful and negative demeanor was befitting of her appearance. If I'm honest, she made me want to drive out of my way to avoid our awkward exchanges. The ease with which she approached my car was unsettling. It wasn't about the money. I could sacrifice an afternoon snack or a Gatorade if it helped her out. I think I avoided any real conversation with her beyond the basics because I believed we really had nothing in common. We were from different worlds. One day, driving toward the intersection, the light turned red, and she began heading my way. As she approached, I rolled down the window and asked how she was. While I fumbled for my wallet, she responded, "Not good. I'm way behind on my rent." Finding no small bills, I handed her a 20. Maybe my donation was exactly what she needed to make her rent. Maybe she thought I finally heard her. Whatever it was, her demeanor changed, and she hurriedly began to ask me questions. "So, what grade are you in?" she asked. "Oh, I'm actually about to be a senior," I replied. These were the first unscripted words we'd ever exchanged, but it was her next words that made me realize that we can connect the dots. "Wow, you have your whole life in front of you, don't you?" she said. "Well, yes, ma'am, I really do." I paused. It wasn't groundbreaking news my whole life was in front of me. My mom tells me that all the time. But I was taken aback to hear such motherly declarations from this woman. A stark realization hit me. She'd experienced more than her share. Why had I, a 17-year-old kid, believed that our differences meant that she had nothing to offer? The walls I had unintentionally built between us were tumbling down. "Well, do you have any advice for me?" I asked. "Hang around the right people, the people going in the right direction." She continued sharing her perspective until the light turned. There was much I wanted to ask, but the traffic behind me wouldn't have understood. As I drove away, I thought about how unyielding I'd been, believing that she was the only one that could benefit from our traffic light interactions. It wasn't so much what she said that stood out. It was how familiar and sound her advice was. She made me realize that every person in this world has something that I can learn from, that I must stay curious and open-minded to find it. Several days later, I saw her. The light was green, but we waved as I passed by. It's funny. She didn't really look like a witch anymore.
I'm answering the prompt, please share a story that is so central to your identity that your application would be incomplete without it. I remember sitting on the backyard patio at my grandparents' house in Chattanooga during Christmas when I was very little, about 8. The gray mountains that surround that city were lost in low, bleak clouds. And the only bright object in the yard to catch my restless eyes was my grandparents' bird feeder. That Christmas was not the first time I had observed the flight of birds through the yard, nor was it the first time I had flipped through the field guide that my grandparents left on the patio table. This time, however, I happened to recognize that the bird on the guide's cover matched one perched nearby, a northern cardinal. I read that the crest helps denote the mood of the bird. A raised crest may mean aggression. I then noticed raised crests on a group of cardinals around the feeder as they attempted to drive one another off. For the first time, I was actively observing the birds instead of simply watching them passively. What followed was an interest that would help sculpt my very persona. That Christmas, I received a plastic bird feeder, which I promptly hung under the huge pine tree that guards my bedroom window. My first visitor was a Carolina chickadee, a bird I would come to recognize by its distinct call. I began to realize that if I were to attract more birds than the typical backyard regulars, I would need some help. So, I purchased a book. Now, 8 years later, 23 ornithological books lie about my room. Over the years, I acquired 6 bird feeders of various types and ultimately succeeded in attracting well over 30 different species of birds to my yard. I began to list the birds I saw and note their behaviors and the food groups to which they were most attracted. I counted the common visitors, plotted their numbers, and noted the time of year to see the changes. I became accustomed to simply observing quietly, taking mental notes, and considering the significance of every action. I also became obsessed with ways to thwart my nemesis, clever squirrels that raided my so-called squirrel-proof bird feeders. The years passed, and as I reached those pre-high school days, when life seems to accelerate uncontrollably, my mornings of quiet observation before school slowly gave way to other demands. As the pace of athletics and homework increased, it became difficult to maintain the feeders with a steady supply of seeds. My carefully kept notes were eventually lost, and one morning as a sophomore, I awoke as the sun was rising and was struck by the quiet outside of my window. The birds are gone. I wistfully resolved to revive my feeders someday and hope for the birds' return. Despite the lapse of my regular birding activities, my wonder for birds continues to influence the way I see the world. I appreciate close observation, the focus on the cause and the effect of the things around me. I listen deeply to classroom discussions, and I try my best to understand the significance of each action. I recognize that people are as varied as the birds I observe, all having their own unique needs and strengths. Even the seasons of my life are marked by the birds I see. The first bluebird heralds the start of spring baseball season, while the appearance of the dark-eyed junco graces the crisp fall days of football season. As you might guess, I've had teammates give me a little bit of grief for loving birds so much, but they miss the point. For me, a rather secretive fascination with birds created a quiet love of observation, analysis, and reflection. You see, birds have the freedom of the sky, a gift I envy. When I ponder the mysteries of the world around me, as I watch them soar through the endless sky, I too find a sort of freedom.
So thank you, Clay and Cole and John. And I thank you, Steve and Bess, who helped initiate all of this. The idea primarily provides an opportunity for us to reflect on writing and on this complex process of applying to college. But it should, I hope, offer some insights into the underclassmen in here about the journey that you're on and the kind of observations, as John was just saying, and Clay pointed out, and Cole in analyzing who we are and what we experience. And now I'd like to ask Ms. Maddox to come up and announce the winner.
Thank you so much. I'd like to ask you guys to give these guys a round of applause for presenting. Okay. All right, and the winner is John Tipp.